If you're anything like me, then you probably identify with the pattern I'm about to share with you. So you start working on a project and you're excited about it, and this is the thing, and it's going to be awesome. And you're working and working and working away on it. And after a while, that thrill of the beginning of stage of a product starts to lull. And then all of a sudden things get hard or complicated or sticky, or you kind of get to that place where it's like, oh, bunch of loose ends and your dopamine levels start to drop precipitously. And at that point, you start looking for the next thing. And then you find the new project that's going to be way better than this project here. And it's going to be the answer to all of your problems. And why didn't you just start in the first place? You immediately jump to the next project and then off to the races you go. And you are so into it. You pour everything into it. You forget to eat, you forget to sleep, you forget to pee. And this ultimately leads to burnout because that mode of hyperfocus is not sustainable, y'all. So then we end up in the state where our batteries are drained and we're exhausted. And now we have two projects that we hate. So the only thing we can do is either stay in bed or pick up another project that will distract us or help us get a little dopamine fix until that starts to cycle through the same thing. That is what we call the inevitable cycle of burnout here in ADHD land. It's not the only cycle of burnout, but it is definitely the one that I've been dealing with a lot lately. Let me explain. I am a solopreneur. Everything I do in my business, I do myself. So when projects start to get hard, I have a tendency to want to pick up new things and get that next dopamine hit. The problem is that when you are the only person in the business and you are not getting things done, then nothing gets done and the business slowly starts to come to a halt. Now, I have been dealing with this in my own business recently, and I had this meta moment yesterday morning, and I thought, oh, this would be great to share because I think a lot of you will relate to this, whether you have a business or not. This is just generally how we dig ourselves into a pit of overwhelm and burnout. And while this still clearly keeps happening to me, I do know how to stop it before I head into burnout. And that is actually what I want to share with you in this video. Should you go through that same chaotic cycle as I do all the time? So here's the situation. In my life, there's a lot of things going on. And when there's a lot of things going on and it feels a little chaotic and out of my control, rather than looking for ways to manage what's already going on, I have a tendency to bring in new things as a way to escape and also create that dopamine input that I really so desperately need. So I keep adding more and more to my plate, and it just gets worse and worse until the point where I've kind of lost all control and I don't even know what to do next because I'm still trying to keep all of these projects going, but I keep adding more and more on. And it got to the point where I had to have a little talk with myself because this was just not sustainable. So I got out my handy dandy journal yesterday, and this is exactly what I did. The first thing I did was write down all of the non negotiables in my life and in my business. And I know exactly what they are because they're all in my Notion planner, which I use religiously. So in my life, I have my well being practices, meditation, walking 10,000 steps a day, working out, heart coherence, breathing. That's what I have to do for me to be a functioning human being. In my business, I have a weekly rhythm, which is recording a video, recording a podcast, doing a newsletter, doing some social media posts, and then responding to customer inquiries. So those are the things that I have to do in my business. Now, I know that those life and business non-negotiables take up a good majority of my day. And then there's sleep, which is really just another non-negotiable that I am unwilling to sacrifice. That tells me that I only have about 3 to 5 hours a day to not only deal with all the adulting things I need to do, like brush my hair, do groceries, cook, all those things, but that's also the only other time I have available to do all of the things that I want to do in my life. So that all sounds pretty straightforward, right? Then in my journal, I wrote down all of the things swirling in my head about what it is I want to do, like right now, today, yesterday, this week. Here we go. I want to rebrand an entire project, start a new YouTube channel on business, create and complete a new email nurture project, work on my ADHD operating system program, reach out to sponsors that I want to work with, revive my Instagram strategy, build my LinkedIn page, create my group coaching program, and launch that program. And then in the personal realm of things, I want to re-landscape my entire house, build a vegetable garden, install floating shelves in my living room, wallpaper a bathroom, and replace the vanity, and then get the house ready for sale or rent. I'm also about to take a trip to Toronto, a trip to Cancun, then plan another trip with my husband, then plan another trip back to California. I also adopted and am trying to train a new dog. Beyond that, I also want to learn how to play tennis, get a certificate in neuroscience, learn everything I can about vagal theory, get a certification in yoga therapy and somatic therapy, and also brush up my skills on online business. Who else but an ADHDer has a to do list that looks like that? Is it any wonder that we never feel like we're getting anything done? Comparatively, we feel like we're not getting anywhere in life, and everybody else around us is going so far and we're going nowhere. Well, the reason for that is that we have unrealistic goals of what's possible in a reasonable time frame. And a lot of that has to do with executive function, right? Planning, organization, time blindness. All of those things contribute to the madness that is in my brain all the time. And when I get into these modes, it creates a lot of anxiety for me, which is a problem. So I could feel that when I was journaling the other morning, thinking about all the things I wanted to do. So I went back to a practice that I have learned to be really helpful and immediately resolves that feeling of angst. And it goes like this. Number one, write down all of your non negotiables, know exactly how long those things take, even if you have to go through the monotonous practice of actually timing yourself to do them. And I will link to a video up here on how to do that. But once you know how many things you have to do in a week, whether it's picking up your kids from school or commuting back and forth to your job, whatever it is that are the non negotiables in your life, once you know how long those take, and you know how many hours there are in a week, there's no negotiating that, and you know how much you need to sleep, then you can calculate exactly how many leftover hours there are in a week for you to not only do all of the adulting things you need to do, but also to create room for all of these new tasks in your life. And when you realize how little time you have to address that massively long to do and wish list, it's a very sobering moment because you realize that is absolutely not possible. So when you get to that step, you've got your big list of all the things you want to do, you have your non-negotiables, you know how much time you have left over in the week. That's when you have to ask yourself this very important question that works for me every single time. What is most important to me right now in this season of life? And when I asked myself that question, it came down to a few very simple things. I've already adopted the dog, so I have to invest the time in training her properly. That's number one. Number two, the vanity in my spare bathroom has already been removed, so I have to focus on getting that replaced. And number three is one project I have to get done in my business in order for everything else to move a lot more smoothly. And I know I don't want to do it. And it's one of those projects that made me dump and dash. But if I don't get that done, it's going to make everything else a lot harder. So when I went through that list and I had that come to Jesus moment of what is most important in this season of life, and I wrote it down, I was able to turn the page in my journal, knowing that all of them are written down and I can come back to them whenever I want and pick up on the next thing and the next thing as my time frees up. I know that I was not doing myself or those projects any justice by trying to let all of them spin in my head without asking that clarifying question. So, if this is your problem, and I know it is because all of my clients come to me with the same complaint of they have all of these things they need to get done, but they're spinning in circles and getting nothing done and wasting all of their energy in the meantime. So, if that's you, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about this problem in two different ways. One of them is a big picture strategy for solving for shiny object syndrome, meaning now that you know that when projects get hard, you have a tendency to move to the next one before that's finished because of either a boredom issue, dopamine, whatever else have you. If you know that that's your tendency, then you got to curate an environment for yourself where that's not as easy to do, both because you've built in accountability to make sure that project gets done, but also you've eliminated distractions. So there's fewer shiny objects coming into your sphere of influence, if you will, which means you might not want to scroll Instagram anymore or YouTube or wherever it is you go to get those bright, shiny objects that distract you from what you're working on in the moment. So think about that from the aspect of the space that you live in, your work environment, what you listen to, the content you bring in. Make sure that you're not being constantly inundated with new ideas because that is literally kryptonite. Then you want to have strategies to manage this in the moment. What do I mean by that? If you're working on a project like the one that I was working on in my business and it starts to get hard and complicated, now at least you're aware of what your behavior is when that happens. So when that happens, and we know it will, you can stop and say to yourself, okay, I see that my attention is starting to drift. What's going on? Maybe the project's getting complicated and you need more support or more clarity. Or even more likely, you're tired, hungry, dehydrated, and you need a break. Very often, at those moments where we hop from one thing to another, all we really need to do is rest and then come back to that original thing the next day when we're refreshed and able to look at it with fresh eyes. So you want to start noticing that habit where you drop one thing and hop to the next, or you want to notice when you're having a hard time getting into that project. For me, that looks like when I sit down at my desk to start working, I have to look at my Notion plan before I look at my email. If I look at my email before I look at my plan for the day, I am losing 3 hours because I'm going to read something in a random email, which is going to inspire a new random thought, which is going to make me look at a random website. And the thought goes on and on and on. And then 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, wow, I haven't even started my workday. So those are the small, nuanced things that you want to start becoming aware of so that you can catch yourself in the moment and ask yourself the simple question of what is it that I need right now so that I don't abandon this project and take on something new. And I have found for myself, when I'm able to look at this problem of creating my own chaos through those two lenses of big picture view, how do I curate my environment and the things that I bring in to make sure that I'm not getting distracted, and also being very clear on what my goal is and why I'm going towards it, then it makes those stop and start habits in the moment a lot less often. And then in the moment, if I can set up reminders for myself to check in, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need a drink? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Do I need to just rest? When I set up alarms and prompts to remind myself to ask myself those things, I am a lot less likely to abandon projects halfway through. And let me tell you something. When you get to a point in life where you can consciously manage how many things you're dealing with in the moment, it gives you a sense of agency and confidence that your life isn't spiraling out of control all the time. So I know the tips that I gave you might seem a little arduous to go through your environment and set up alarms and systems for yourself. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. But you know what? I'd rather have the short term annoyance of setting all that stuff up for myself than deal with this constant feeling of angst. Like, my life is out of control and I don't know where anything is and I don't know what's important. And I'm just spinning in circles, wasting all my energy until I completely burn out and start feeling crappy about myself. So, if this resonates with you and you want to get out of that pit of overwhelm, once again, grab a paper and a pen, write down your non negotiables, get very specific about how much time in a week your non negotiables take. Also, add in a line item for sleep and then list out all of the things that are important or feel important that you're struggling to prioritize and that you really need to get done. Like you have that angst around. And then ask yourself the question, what is most important for me at this time in my life, in this season? And that will help you clarify the one, two, or three things that have to get done first. And I know your resistance is going to be, but everything feels important. Everything is important. Everything needs to get done. But if you stay in that belief, nothing will get done because that is where you currently are. So try this trick of just picking three things based on the amount of time you actually have available to get things done. Pick the most important three, get those done first, and then keep working away at that list. And not only will you get through your project list, okay, let's be real, you're never going to get through all your project list, but not only will you make progress on it, you'll also feel a lot more peaceful in the process. Trust me on this one. And if you want to dive deeper into this whole process, I highly recommend checking out Distraction to Action, which is my productivity program designed especially for ADHD adults who want to get more schnizzle done, but have a hard time following through. So, on that note, guys, thanks very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.